President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, leaving open the possibility that the president spoke with Michael Cohen about his testimony before Congress.
As far as I know, President Trump did not have discussions with him, certainly had no discussions with him in which he told him or counseled him to lie. If he had any discussions with him, they'd be about the version of the events that Michael Cohen gave then, which they all believe was true.
But you just acknowledged that it's possible that President Trump talked to Michael Cohen about his testimony.
Which would be perfectly normal, which the president believed was true.
So it's possible that that happened, that President Trump talked to Michael Cohen about his testimony.
I don't know if it happened or didn't happen. And it might be attorney-client privileged if it happened, where I can't acknowledge it.
We're joined now by John Avlon, Joe Lockhart, and Shan Wu, a former federal prosecutor. And Shan, I want to start with you on this one because the way that Rudy Giuliani lays it out there, look, even if he did, so what if he talked to him? It would be perfectly normal if there was no guidance given by the president. If it was simply a conversation, not one in which he in any way directed Michael Cohen to say anything, is it a big deal?
It's a really big deal. It's quite preposterous, actually, that any criminal defense attorney would have allowed that conversation in those circumstances. That's rules number 1 through 20, that you don't want to have your client commit obstruction of justice. And for him to talk to Cohen about that upcoming congressional testimony, Cohen's under investigation. Obviously, his office has been raided. It makes no sense to say that's perfectly normal. Is just simply silly. That's obviously just spinning, not lawyering.
Yeah, I mean, it is not normal at all for someone to speak to a witness about their testimony beforehand, particularly the President of the United States who may be connected to that investigation. John Avlon, first of all, happy birthday.
Well,
yes,
thank you.
Happy belated.
Yeah.
I got you another trip to the Super Bowl for the New England Patriots. You didn't want that. I got that for you before.
I wanted the Saints Chiefs. I got to say.
All right.
We'll take a week.
BuzzFeed happened on Friday.
Yeah.
I think we have to put that aside and almost pretend as if it didn't happen. It's the season of Dallas that doesn't exist in my memory anymore. However, a lot has happened since then that if it happened in a vacuum would be fascinating. That claim that Giuliani made to Jake, that it'd be perfectly normal for the president to speak to Michael Cohen before the testimony. That's astounding. Also the claim that Giuliani made over the weekend, not just to Jake, not just to the New York Times, but also to Chuck Todd, that the president and Michael Cohen talked about the Trump Tower deal in Moscow all the way until the end of the election. Listen to this.
Yeah. It's our understanding that they went on throughout 2016. Weren't a lot of them, but there were conversations. Can't be sure of the exact dates, but the president can remember having conversations with him about it.
Throughout 2016?
The president also remembered. Yeah, probably could be up to as far as October, November. Our answers cover until the election. So anytime during that period, they could have talked about it.
Probably until October, November. He makes it crystal clear in writing to the New York Times later. This goalpost moving is really, really interesting. And don't forget, the president has said all along, I have no deals with Russia.
Right. This is, I think, in some ways, the more significant of the slip-ups over the weekend because it not only moves the goalpost from June, July, but through the election. Why does it matter? Well, because the president the entire time is, then candidate Trump notably, asking Russia to intercede on his behalf with the emails, refusing to criticize Vladimir Putin, criticizing sanctions. This is notable, and Rudy had a cogent defense that he offered from a businessman standpoint. Look, if I have a request, if I have a proposal out, that's not business, right? That's not actually a transaction yet. That is true and makes sense, except if you're running for president of the United States. In the context of running for president, it's insane to be having an active deal with a foreign power who is hostile, who are you refusing to criticize. So that, to me, is a huge deal that came out yesterday.
There's also, too, I mean, just to continue looking at this, there's also the number of times that it was denied, right, which we've touched on. But that, too, I mean, it's not the first time that something has come up that the president may have denied repeatedly, but especially when we're talking about something like this, Joe, you can't ignore that.
No, and I think the significance to the average voter is collusion, conspiracy is something that you really have to wrap your head around. You have to spend a lot of time looking into things. This is like a big piece of the puzzle, though, for people, which says, okay, now maybe I understand why he did these things, why he was working with the Russians, why he was so open to easing sanctions and saying nice things about Putin, because he was trying to make a deal. And Giuliani talked there about, it went through the answers they gave to the independent counsel, which led up to the election. They wouldn't answer anything about once he was president. We have no idea when these conversations now actually stopped. Did they go on through the transition? Were they going on through the presidency? But I think for most people, they look at this and they say, I understand. Now I understand, what the pro and the quid was.
Right, and it also brings up the point too, again and again and again, which can be applied in so many areas of if it wasn't such a big deal, right? If it wasn't such a big deal and if you weren't really that involved and there wasn't that much going on, why continue to deny it?
It's a fair point.
The pattern of denial is in some ways the most compelling testimony. The Trump team, not just the president, but his entire team, has denied any interactions with Russia over and over again, from the campaign to the transition to the administration. And over again, the investigation, they are confronted with facts, and those denials are non-operative. Dozens and dozens and dozens of times. That itself is a fact pattern that screams smoke, if not actual fire.
I will say, from a communication standpoint and a political standpoint, it was interesting to me that Giuliani took this weekend in the wake of the BuzzFeed to get these facts out there. It was probably smart PR there, the timing of that.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think they felt a boost.
Yep.
I can tell you from my experience going through the Starr investigation, once every 6 to 8 weeks, someone would get something absolutely wrong.
Right.
And it didn't make them terrible reporters. They just got something wrong. And we would take advantage of that. And I think in this case, and what Giuliani does, is he sort of kind of bumbles and stumbles into his way of saying something that 2 or 3 weeks later we find out is absolutely true. And what he's trying to do is take a little bit of the sting out of it. On the denials, I'll say something in defense of Donald Trump. He lies about everything. So the idea that he lied about this maybe doesn't mean as much as we think.
So, Shan, I want to go back now to the idea that the president talked to Michael Cohen, perhaps, about his testimony before Congress, before Michael Cohen gave it. What is the legal liability here for the president? Because this seems to be a gray area, and this does touch on the BuzzFeed thing, but again, I want to now, that's Bobby Ewing. We're pretending that didn't happen here. But if the president knew that Michael Cohen was going to say something that he knew was going to be false to Congress here, when is it incumbent upon the president legally, and then I suppose morally is a separate question, to step in and say no?
It's really not incumbent on him legally to do anything. What is incumbent on him not to do legally is to make any suggestions on what to say. And that can be done very subtly. But if you look at that from the special counsel's point of view and find that there was corrupt intent, you might remember Manafort got into some hot water for really writing some communications suggesting something along the lines of, maybe this is how it happened, this is how I remember it. And it can be done that subtly, but if the intent is there to affect the testimony, that's going to be problematic for him. It does not have to be as blatant as, I want you to tell a lie and say such and such, although given the way that the president talks, I would not be surprised if that's actually the way the conversation went. But it can be nuanced, it can be subtle, and the point is, why would you have any business talking to him before then? That's something for his lawyers to do, not for you to be doing.
And from a non-legal point of view, why would he need to coordinate testimony? If he knew he did nothing wrong and Michael Cohen did nothing wrong, why would they need to have a discussion about what he was going to talk about? It's only, you only compare notes and get straight on your story when there's something about your story that's wrong.
All right, Joe, John, Shan, thank you all very much for being with us this morning. Appreciate it.